At exactly 2:07 a.m., the silence of the Colorado mountains was shattered. Tires screeched across gravel like a warning too late. Floodlights cut through the pine fog, locking onto a remote cabin nestled deep beyond any marked road. 6 men in full tactical gear emerged from blacked-out SUVs. No badges, no announcement, no legal warrant. Just weapons, radios, and intent. Their formation was tight, boots thudding against frozen earth with quiet aggression. They moved like they'd done this before, but this time, they hadn't done their homework. Inside that cabin, Zaria Clark was already awake. The moment the first tripwire sensor flickered on her encrypted dashboard, she rose like someone who'd trained for this very hour. Not a sound, not a stumble. Just calculated movement, years of federal-level training igniting beneath her calm exterior. She wasn't a schoolteacher, not a retiree, not the harmless woman in the woods they assumed. She was ex-CIA, Tier 1 intelligence, and for the last 6 years, she had been the keeper of secrets powerful men paid millions to bury. She didn't reach for a weapon. Not yet. She knelt beside a hidden panel behind her stone hearth and unlocked it with a biometric scan only one living person could activate. A soft click confirmed her command signal had gone through. Protocol Echo 9, a dormant security system she had designed herself, far outside any commercial surveillance service. Not for show, not for fear, but for precision. It would cut radios, jam trackers, and log every thermal signature inside the perimeter. It was a digital fortress cloaked in pine. 2 pairs of eyes glowed faintly from the shadows. Echo and Hayes, Belgian Malinois trained for federal K-9 operations, emerged without sound. They didn't bark. They waited. Zaria gave a whisper of a command. Positions. Echo slinked to the rear corridor, Hayes to the front. No wasted motion, no confusion. Because what was about to enter that home wasn't a police force. It was a private hit team disguised as one. Outside, a voice cracked through the radio. "We've got 2 minutes. Make it look like a burglary." Another replied, "Torch the drives. She doesn't walk out." That was all Zaria needed. This wasn't a raid. It was a cover-up. But they weren't raiding a cabin. They were walking into a war room. What they didn't know, what they could never have predicted, was that Zaria wasn't just a survivor. She was a strategist. And every inch of that property had been prepared not for comfort, but for confrontation. They came for a cleanup job. But the moment their boots touched her floorboards, they activated something no one could stop. And when the first blow hit the cabin door, Zaria didn't flinch. She stood, tucked a drive into her waistband, and whispered one word that would change everything. Engage. Zaria Clark didn't blink when the battering ram struck the door. The creak of splintering wood echoed like a clock ticking down. She had already moved to her secondary control console, disguised behind a bookshelf lined with first-edition military histories, and initiated the full lockdown. Her fingers flew across the old-style mechanical keypad. Not touchscreen. Too easy to spoof. Her system was hardwired, air-gapped, and designed to survive EMP-level interference. She didn't just install security, she engineered it. Because Zaria Clark had never been ordinary, and this cabin wasn't her sanctuary. It was a trap. For them. 6 years earlier, she had vanished off the intelligence grid after a mission in Moldova went sideways. Her team, Black Ops, no insignia, no records, had uncovered a data pipeline between U.S. contractors and hostile foreign networks. When they tried to report it, 3 of her people died in a training accident. Zaria didn't buy it. So she didn't go home. She went dark. She erased her signature from every federal system and disappeared into the Rockies with only 2 things, her working mind and the encrypted drive they died protecting. The cabin had been her fortress since then. Built with her own hands, funded through non-traceable crypto accounts, reinforced with gear most federal agencies didn't know she still had access to. Her life was quiet, on the surface. She split firewood, trained Echo and Hayes daily, studied satellite footage of property seizures across the western U.S., and watched from afar as one name kept showing up on the paper trail: Dorian Clive. Clive wasn't just a billionaire real estate developer, he was the architect of a quiet war, one that displaced families, veterans, and black landowners through a web of shell companies, rezoning deals, and armed intimidation. What Zaria had on that drive was damning. It connected Clive's holdings directly to paramilitary groups paid to carry out off-the-books raids, masked as legal repossessions. It proved he wasn't just building resorts. He was building control, and her 5-acre ridge sat at the choke point of his newest land corridor. Weeks before this night, she'd noticed the subtle signs. A single-engine drone is scanning the property line, a sudden loss of signal in her secondary cameras. Someone had reactivated an old SATCOM signature she used in her CIA days. They were tracking her. Not to arrest her, to erase her. But Zaria had never survived by waiting for justice. She prepared, upgraded her systems, mapped every blind spot, installed thermal disruptors, motion sensors, and acoustic dampeners. If they came for her, they'd walk into something built by someone who once trained assassins for a living. Outside, the men formed up at the shattered doorway. The lead one gave a low hand signal. This wasn't their first job. Their formation, their pacing, the staggered movement. Zaria recognized the rhythm. These weren't rookies. They were ex-contractors. Hired guns. Likely paid through one of Clive's consulting firms based offshore. No names, no jurisdiction, no oversight. But they had underestimated her, and they were 2 minutes too late. She whispered another command into her headset, low enough only Hayes could hear. The dog shifted forward by inches, waiting just behind a false wall panel designed to pop open when triggered. Echo, now circling the back hallway, waited near the kitchen's thermal vent system. If they split their forces, they'd walk right into his path. Zaria reached into her tactical pouch and retrieved a soft-wrapped device the size of a bar of soap. A signal nullifier. Silent, undetectable to the human ear, but once active, it would scramble their team's comms to static. She activated it, then moved behind the kitchen island, crouched low, her breath steady. Her heart didn't race. Her mind calculated. She had been in worse places with fewer options, and she'd never lost a fight in her own territory. Outside, a voice crackled again, this time closer. "Move! We breach now! 2 front, 2 right, 2 sweep." It was a textbook room-clearing protocol, likely taught in some former federal contractor course now rebranded as private security. But the second they crossed that doorframe, every tactic they'd been taught would collapse. Because this wasn't a drug raid. This wasn't a soft civilian target. This was Zaria Clark's cabin, and if they didn't know her name before tonight, they'd never forget it after. The front door didn't just burst open. It fractured inward like an old tree trunk splitting under pressure. The first man through was tall, deliberate, scanning left, then right, shoulder tensed, trigger finger half-cocked. But he never made it 2 steps. Hayes lunged from the dark like a whisper turned into muscle. 80 pounds of controlled precision collided with the intruder's chest. His rifle clattered against the floor. He went down with a grunt, followed by chaos. The second man staggered forward, confused by the sudden shift in formation, just as Echo emerged from the rear hallway and clipped his legs clean out from under him. Tactical boots scrambled for traction on the wood floor, slick with condensation from the cabin's sudden temperature shift. Zaria had planned that too. The HVAC system dumped a 20-degree drop in specific rooms, fogging optics and affecting grip. It was psychological warfare, silent and scientific. And it worked. Zaria moved from cover to cover, using her intimate knowledge of the cabin's architecture. Every blind corner was designed for ambush. Every door, double-hinged for sudden reversal. Every window reinforced with shatterproof polymer, invisible to the eye but strong enough to stop a short-range slug. As the team inside struggled to reorganize, she dropped another device into the hallway, a thermal scrambler. It didn't harm them, it just destroyed their ability to see, to track, to act. And in combat, hesitation was defeat. Still, Zarya wasn't arrogant. She knew these weren't amateurs. They would adjust, regroup. Which meant she had less than 4 minutes before they flipped into full offensive mode. That was all she needed. She made her way to the back room, a secure space disguised as a storage closet. Inside was a hardened satellite relay, one of the few she'd salvaged during her final mission abroad. She connected the primary node, encrypted the data stream, and entered a single command phrase. Protocol Echo 9. Activate all assets. Then she waited. The response came seconds later. 3 green pings lit up on her tablet's edge display. They weren't names. They were call signs. And all of them were former intelligence personnel who owed her their lives. One, a former communications intercept expert. Another, a surveillance drone pilot now working in fire management. And the third, Eli Drayton. Eli hadn't spoken to Zarya in over 5 years. Not because of anger, because of what they'd both seen and survived. Back then, they were part of a covert civilian military intelligence unit known as Sentinel Watch. It wasn't listed on any agency's website, but it existed in the margins of real-time response. When bureaucracy failed, Sentinel acted. Quietly. Legally. Effectively. The last time Eli saw Zarya was outside Kabul. She had just pulled him out of a burning convoy under enemy fire. He lost part of his leg in that blast, but never his loyalty. Since then, he'd gone underground, coordinating veterans across several states who were facing suspicious land seizures, forced foreclosures, and raids disguised as code enforcement. Sound familiar? It was the same playbook Zarya had uncovered, the same one Dorian Clive was expanding. Now Eli's call sign lit up on her screen in bright green. His location triangulated from 50 miles out and closing fast. She didn't need to speak, didn't need to explain. Just the alert was enough. He was coming. Back inside the cabin, things were shifting. One of the intruders had pulled himself upright and thrown a flash grenade toward the kitchen. The noise cracked through the house like a gunshot wrapped in thunder. Zarya ducked behind the stone hearth, her ears ringing, but her focus razor-sharp. She didn't panic. She calculated. She used the brief chaos to move, not backward, forward. In one fluid motion, she crossed through the dining area, flanked by the dogs now returning to her side on silent command. She activated a switch near the ground-level vent, releasing a fog compound through the floorboards. Non-toxic, odorless, but it created instant visual distortion. Anyone without training or thermal adaptation would be rendered functionally blind. That bought her the last 30 seconds she needed. She returned to the main hall just as one of the men shouted, "We've been compromised! She's got comms with someone!" Another fired randomly into the fog, hitting nothing but drywall. Zarya crouched low, clipped a signal jammer to the sideboard near the entryway, and watched their radios go dead. The room dropped into an eerie silence, broken only by their heavy breathing and the low, deliberate growl of Hayes guarding the front door. Zarya finally spoke. "You came to clean up a mess," she said, voice steady, clear, rising above the tension. "You should have checked who made it first." The silence in response told her everything. They didn't know her name, but now they did, and it terrified them. Then came the final sound that changed the dynamic completely. Tires on gravel. Outside, fast, but not reckless. Zarya glanced at the wall camera feed and saw them. 4 trucks, no lights, matte black paint, ex-military. Doors opened. No shouting, just movement. Deliberate, familiar. Eli Drayton had arrived. The second Eli's lead vehicle came to a complete stop, and the energy on the ground shifted. Inside the cabin, one of the intruders regained his stance, raising his weapon toward the hallway, just as Echo emerged like a bullet from the shadows. Zarya had trained the dog to strike center mass, not to kill, but to drop a grown man like a tree. The man hit the floor hard, air knocked out of his lungs before he could fire a shot. Echo spun and repositioned at her side without a sound. Simultaneously, the fog still curling through the hallway provided just enough cover for Hayes to intercept the man who had tried to circle the back. The attacker didn't even get a warning. The dog collided with his shoulder from an angle just shy of his blind spot, driving him against the wooden frame of the utility door. His weapon tumbled. Hayes remained mounted until Zarya gave the release signal. The man didn't try to get up again. While the intruders scrambled, unsure how many people they were actually facing, Zarya activated the final jammer. The unit she planted earlier had a limited range. This one covered the entire ridge. All radios cut to static, all GPS links severed. That moment of silence, the loss of tactical clarity, pushed the group into desperation. Two shouted over each other. One fired blindly again. But the network was gone. They were in the dark. Isolated, no backup, and they knew it. Unbeknownst to them, Zarya had embedded audio sensors beneath the cabin floor, not just in defense of herself, but as insurance. One man whispered to the other, "This ain't no land eviction. She's ex-CIA." The other muttered, "Then why are we here?" The reply? "Because Clive wants her gone before sunrise. Burn the drives. Leave nothing breathing." The data was already uploading to Zarya's off-site servers. While the remaining intruders braced themselves at the front windows, expecting a breach, Eli's team, veterans of desert wars and covert insertions, flanked silently through the tree line and split. Two circled wide to cut off any escape. Two used their knowledge of cabin schematics to enter through the elevated crawl space beneath the east side. The point wasn't to overwhelm with force. It was containment. Fast, quiet, precise. Knowing the intruders were about to regroup, she fell back to what looked like a panic room off the hallway. Its thick steel door had been bait all along. As expected, two of the attackers followed her movement and lunged inside, finding nothing but a cold, metal-lined space. Zarya locked the door behind them from the outside, trapping them. Within 10 seconds, the ventilation kicked in, rapidly lowering the temperature. Not enough to harm, just enough to debilitate. They'd last 5 minutes in there before muscle coordination failed. One of the men dropped a biometric decryptor device during his scuffle. Zarya scooped it up and used the attacker's own thumb, still dazed and cuffed in a tactical hold, to unlock it. The device displayed cached logs of previous job details, encrypted transactions, coordinates, and yes, target profiles. Hers was listed under Priority Blackout. Client, Clive Strategic Holdings. Payment issued via an offshore entity. No more speculation. This was an assassination order. Zarya knew one would try to run, so she let him. As soon as the window cracked open in the back room, a single figure slipped into the woods. What he didn't know was that Zarya had tagged him, subdermally, during the brief melee using a tracker coded to mimic a skin abrasion patch. As he ran, his body heat activated the signal. Eli's two perimeter men intercepted him near a dry creek bed. He never made it half a mile. The men still inside were bound, subdued, but not unconscious. Eli walked among them with cold, methodical efficiency. "Names?" he asked. No answer. "Who sent you?" Silence. That's when Zarya stepped forward and dropped the decryptor on the table. She tapped the screen. The transaction history scrolled slowly. Then she said, "You don't need to confess. I already have proof. But if you want your names cleared before the feds arrive, now's your only window." One man broke. Not because of pain, but because he understood something the others didn't. This woman wasn't trying to scare them. She was trying to expose something bigger, and they were just pawns. He whispered, "Clive doesn't care if we get out, just that you don't." Zarya leaned in. "Then let's change the plan." As dawn began to bleed pale gold through the tree line, the cabin fell still again. Zarya stood in the hallway, overlooking the aftermath. Not chaos, but clarity. The hard drives Clive wanted destroyed were now mirrored and archived on multiple satellite nodes. The body cam footage from the attackers was confiscated. The tracker from the fleeing man revealed coordinates of a warehouse in Gunnison, a local hub Zarya suspected had deeper ties to illegal seizures statewide. She walked past the intruders without acknowledgement, without rage, just cold, measured purpose. One of them tried to look her in the eye and failed. Another muttered, "We were just doing our job." Zarya paused at the doorway. "Then next time, ask who signs your paycheck, because whoever sent you will need either a lawyer or a priest." Outside, Eli stood by the lead SUV, flanked by two of his men. "Federal jurisdiction's been alerted," he said. "You've got 10 minutes until agents arrive. Everything's logged, synced, uploaded. They can't scrub this." Zarya nodded. She wasn't here to escape. She was here to make sure they couldn't deny what happened. Zarya didn't speak for the next 10 minutes. She didn't have to. The footage spoke louder. Every second of the raid, thermal signatures, audio logs, weapon flashes, voice print recognition, was already being uploaded to 3 encrypted cloud servers across 3 states. Each had a timed trigger. If Zarya didn't check in every 6 hours, the full package would auto-release to over 40 vetted journalists, legal aid firms, and civil liberty watchdogs. It was an old CIA failsafe, called the Dead Hand Doctrine. Only now, it didn't belong to the agency. It belonged to her. Inside the cabin, one of the attackers sat slumped against the wall, face pale, lips pressed into a tight line. His eyes kept darting to the red blinking light on Zarya's backup terminal. It was a camera, recording everything, every word, every face, every hesitation. No one was scrubbing this clean. Outside, the hum of new vehicles approached. Not loud, not hostile, sleek, unmarked, federal. Eli had notified them using a secure channel only accessible through the Sentinel Watch network. They wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. They'd been watching Dorian Clive from a distance for months, waiting for him to slip. What happened tonight? It wasn't just a slip. It was a full-blown rupture. A black sedan with government plates rolled up the dirt path. 2 men exited, no weapons drawn, no shouting. Just a calm presence that radiated authority. One stepped forward and nodded toward Zarya. "Ms. Clark," he said. "I'm Deputy Director Monroe, Department of Homeland Security." Zarya didn't move. "You're late." "We weren't invited," he replied. "Until now." She eyed him for a long beat, then stepped aside. "Then start watching." Inside, Monroe reviewed the synced footage, cross-referencing it with his department's confidential surveillance reports. What he saw aligned with whispers they hadn't been able to confirm for over a year. Dorian Clive had weaponized a web of private contractors, bought-off sheriffs, and real estate lobbyists to seize control of land across the western states. Quietly, illegally, without a single headline. But tonight he hadn't counted on Zarya Clark still being alive, or prepared. "Your system," Monroe murmured, scrolling through satellite triangulation and live drone footage, "is cleaner than most agency protocols." "That's because I didn't build it to be pretty," Zarya replied. "I built it to survive corruption." Monroe nodded. "We've been trying to put eyes on Clive's operation for 18 months, but he's layered in LLCs, lobbyists, and legal shields. This might finally be our opening." Zarya didn't smile. "This isn't an opening, this is a wrecking ball." Eli approached from the hallway. "What's your angle, Monroe?" The DHS director folded his arms. "We want her under protective custody. With what she has, she becomes the central witness in a case with national implications. We get her in, build the case, get her testimony sealed." Zarya shook her head before he finished. "No, I'm not disappearing. I'm not some scared asset in hiding. I'm not letting Clive or anyone like him control the story. You'll be a target, Monroe warned. I already am. A tense silence followed. Then she continued. But this time I'm not running. I'm releasing everything on my terms. She walked to the mounted server near her kitchen counter, inserted the encrypted drive, and began to sort files. Names, dates, coordinates, payment transfers, satellite pings, police radio logs, every raid similar to hers from Idaho to Arizona, dozens of them. Veterans, retirees, Black and indigenous families, always the same pattern. False code violations, fabricated liens, mysteriously timed utility cuts, and then forced removal. She selected the files, packaged them with footage from tonight, and initiated a staggered public release. Small, trustworthy outlets first. Local whistleblower platforms. Veteran-run media. Journalists with a history of exposing land seizure fraud. No corporate news. Not yet. I want the public to hear it before the spin machine even warms up, she said. If it hits mainstream first, Clive's team will bury it in minutes. But if it grows underground, viral and steady, by the time they notice, it'll be too late to kill. Eli gave a quiet laugh. She's not wrong. Monroe remained still, calculating. You're turning this into a war. Zarya didn't flinch. It already was. I'm just putting uniforms on both sides. By dawn, the ripple had already started. Justice for Ridge Strike. Zarya Clark. Land Backwatch. Sentinel exposed. They weren't hashtags born from media teams. They were real, raw. From people who had watched land go missing, watched families evicted, and had no name for the enemy until now. Within 12 hours, Zarya's footage had been mirrored in 7 states. Independent analysts verified the GPS data. Legal experts weighed in. One whistleblower attorney called the video the most damning civilian-led exposure of collusion between private industry and militarized enforcement we've seen in 20 years. But Zarya wasn't reading headlines. She was calling survivors. Her small kitchen table became a war desk. A former schoolteacher in Nevada whose home was seized while she was attending her mother's funeral. A Black couple in Wyoming was forced to sign over their ranch after being threatened with deportation, despite being U.S. citizens. A Marine vet in Utah who'd been arrested after refusing access to inspectors with no ID. They all shared one thing. They thought no one would believe them. Zarya didn't just believe. She documented, archived, verified. She cross-referenced every case with the payment trail she'd uncovered. Names started matching. Sheriffs, developers, politicians, all orbiting Clive's network. And then came Alicia Penn. Alicia was a former JAG attorney turned civil rights litigator. She had been tracking Clive's holdings for 3 years. The moment she saw Zarya's release, she drove 300 miles and showed up in person. You don't need to file a report, Alicia said. You need to launch a class action lawsuit. Zarya looked at the folder Alicia brought. 36 names, all victims of what now had a name, tactical land displacement. This isn't just fraud, Alicia said. It's coordinated removal. Zarya nodded. Then it ends now. By week's end, the first federal injunctions were filed. Asset freezes followed. Clive's lawyers tried to spin it, blaming overzealous subcontractors. But the footage was airtight. The audio was inescapable. The court of public opinion had already passed judgment. Still, Zarya knew the system wouldn't fall overnight. She wasn't naive. But she also knew something deeper had been restored. People were no longer whispering. They were testifying. And through it all, Zarya never left the cabin. It became more than her home. It became the first command center for something bigger. Sentinel Watch 2.0, a network of trained volunteers, lawyers, veterans, and analysts built to protect, expose, and teach communities how to defend their land legally, digitally, and tactically. She didn't want power. She wanted visibility, because power corrupts. But visibility, it protects. When Monroe returned weeks later, he brought news. Clive's out of the country, he said. Interpol's involved now. We might get him, or we might not. Zarya didn't look up from her laptop. I'm not chasing one man. I'm building a firewall. He nodded. You did more in 72 hours than we could in a year. No, she said. I just didn't ask permission. That night, the cabin was quiet again. Snow on the porch. Echo and Hayes are asleep near the fireplace. Zarya sipped tea, watching the fire reflect in the glass. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was leading. The snow returned, soft and quiet, dusting the pines like the mountain was trying to forget what had happened here. But the cabin remembered. And so did she. Zarya Clark stood on her porch, wrapped in an old army green jacket stitched with memories no one else could see. The air was still, just the faint scent of pine and ash clinging to the wind. Echo sat by her left side, ears perked. Hayes on the right, alert but calm. Both dogs had returned to their usual state. Not predators, not weapons, just guardians. She held a ceramic mug in both hands. Not coffee this time. Ginger tea. Something warm to remind her body that it had made it through another war. She wasn't tired. She wasn't broken. But she was changed. She thought about the people who had reached out in the past few days. Farmers, widows, veterans, single mothers. Names she didn't know, but stories she understood instantly. Their voices cracked in the same places hers once had. Some of them whispered. Some cried, but none of them were silent anymore. That was the real victory. Not the headlines, not the lawsuits, not the asset freezes or news clips showing Clive's name tied to corruption. The real win was that they had finally been seen. And not because someone handed them justice, but because someone showed them how to take it. Inside the cabin, the monitor lit up with new pings. Sentinel Watch nodes are expanding. A retired intel officer in Oregon offering drone footage. A group of law students in Atlanta is volunteering to help verify land records. A native elder in New Mexico is uploading oral testimony from tribal council meetings long buried by red tape. The movement had taken root. It was growing beyond her. Zarya stepped back inside. Her boots thudded gently on the wooden floor. No longer a war drum, just a rhythm of presence. She moved past the reinforced panels, past the control console, and stopped at the dining table. In the center sat a simple manila folder. No encryption, no password. Just handwriting across the front. In case I don't make it back. It was a letter she'd written to herself 6 years ago, the night she disappeared from the system. She picked it up now and opened it. The note inside read, "If you're reading this, it means you lived long enough to choose something better than survival. Don't forget why you left. Don't forget who they tried to erase. But most of all, don't forget that silence never saved anyone. You know too much to hide. And you're not alone anymore." Zarya folded the letter slowly and tucked it back. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The fire inside her didn't leave space for tears. It had a different purpose now. Not revenge, not even justice. Clarity. As the sun broke through the trees, casting long gold shadows across the ridge, she walked back out onto the porch. Another truck was pulling into the gravel drive. A young man stepped out, black, mid-20s, a little nervous, holding a case of equipment. He wore a hoodie that said, "Know your rights, protect your land." Zarya smiled. "You made it." He nodded. "Ready to get to work." And just like that, the next chapter began. Because power doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears boots on the snow, scars under sleeves, and a voice that refuses to disappear. And now the world was finally listening.